am standing in the prayer garden of the National Association campground. This campground has been bathed in prayer. It was conceived in prayer. The vision for it came during a prayer session on the part of Ernest W. Wimbish. He was engaged to a young woman by the name of Priscilla, and he confided to her that he had had a vision of a place where believers could gather for fellowship and nurture and for worship. He was on the hunt for such a place during his youth. After his marriage, they moved from Cleveland, Ohio to Pennsylvania, in the area now known as Sharon, Pennsylvania. And he continued to look for that spot that he'd seen in the vision that he thought should be used as a place for a camp meeting. In the midst of the group to which he belonged, there was a man by the name of J.A. Chrisman, a businessman in the area. And as they talked together, Wimbish shared his vision with Mr. Chrisman. Chrisman was quite a hunter. And one day he was out in this particular area where I'm now standing, hunting. And he remembered the vision that Wimbish had shared with him, and he said to himself, "This must be the place. I'm going to share this with Wimbish." He did so, brought Wimbish back. They moved around in this area, and Wimbish said, "This is the place." On January 1st, 1917, they bought this place, 116 acres. And since that time, the development has taken place, and now we have this marvelous entity on these hallowed grounds. Prayer was the key to it all. This is the place. That has often been stated as we would gather for worship across these grounds, and now for nearly a century, this place has helped to nurture countless believers. In fact, in 1955, there were more than 10,000 on these grounds for the meeting. The Pittsburgh Courier that year had a large story concerning the development of this campground and the meaning of it. And that particular issue of the Pittsburgh Courier is a treasured portion of the heritage that is honored here. Of course, there have been other written accounts. Katie Davis wrote a book many years ago about Zion's Hill at West Middlesex, because the place has been designated as Zion's Hill. For here the Lord is understood. His word is taught, his people are greeted, and his message remembered and shared. His work is underscored, and those who come together here for meeting go back to where they are to do his work. The growth of this meeting has taken place under such auspicious conditions because the great leaders who have come to be a part of this work have been inspirational figures, and many of the buildings on this campground are named after such leading figures among us. One of the major buildings on this campground, and one of the oldest, is Wimbish Hall, named in honor of Ernest W. Wimbish, the founder of the camp meeting, and his wife Priscilla. Another noted building on the campground is Chrisman Administration Building, named after J.A. Chrisman, the person who located these grounds and told Wimbish about them. Central also to the growth and development of this camp meeting and this National Association have been leaders of the General Ministerial Assembly. The first president of the Assembly, or chairperson, was Rufus J. Smith, one of the pastors in Pittsburgh nurtured in the faith by Jane Williams and others, and he was so contagious in his fellowship and so gifted that God used him in a responsible way to develop many churches across the eastern part of the United States. And after beginning his pastorate in Pittsburgh, became leader here in the association. Rufus J. Smith was a noted leader not only among the African Americans, but within the Church of God movement on a widespread scale. He was associated with some of the earliest leaders of the movement and was well known in other states as well, Michigan, Ohio, and he was a frequent camp meeting speaker in other places. He was a man whose soul was so open that he found fellowship with everyone who was a believer, and it made no difference to him, for he felt no difference. He was the kind of man whose spirit helped to nurture the kind of teaching that took place on these grounds during his leadership role. Following him was George R. Dixon, who became the pastor of the group in Sharon, Pennsylvania, that had earlier been known as the Brothers and Sisters of Love. The Brothers and Sisters of Love were the group to which Wimbish and his wife belonged. They were a very small fellowship, and they knew nothing about the Church of God when they first started in around 1909 or 10. It was in 1911 or 12 when they learned about Church of God congregations in this particular area, and Church of God ministers came to meet with their group, and they agreed that what was being taught by the Brothers and Sisters of Love were the same teachings that the movement espoused and was teaching. So the Brothers and Sisters of Love became a Church of God congregation in Sharon in 1913. George R. Dixon came and became the pastor of that group and stayed for many years. He also became the second president of the National Association and the second president or chairperson of the General Ministerial Assembly. Following him was S.J. Taylor, a graduate of Talladega College in Alabama, a scholar by nature, a strong biblical preacher, and an innovative thinker. Quiet by nature, but very determined in his spirit, he helped to direct the learning of many ministers who became part of this association and inspired them for work in the church. Following S.J. Taylor was Daniel F. Oden, a longtime minister in Birmingham, Alabama, who in 1917 went to Detroit, Michigan to pastor the Church of God of Detroit. Reverend Oden was also, like R.J. Smith, well known throughout the movement and was one of the original members, one of the 7 original members of the Missionary Board of the Church of God, located in Anderson, Indiana. The growth of the movement continued under such able leaders, and the growth of the association continued under such able leaders. In 1968, the growth of the Church of God among African Americans was more than 16,000, and by 1978, it was more than 40,000. The National Association, with its inspirational work, was part of the cause of moving the membership to such an extent. The workers were tireless, the workers were trained, the workers were able, and the workers were effective. The National Association has had a great deal to do with the growth of the total movement in its membership. Even on and international scale as far as the islands of the Caribbean.